Okay, hi, my name's Dean Legge, the editor and owner of something called dogpost.com and Dog Post magazine. I'm one of the 3 photographers we use at Georgia's football games every weekend. I'm also the #1 writer, etc. for the site. But today what we're going to talk about are some of the images, and one image in particular that I think is one of the better pictures I've taken over the last, say, 15 years. Been covering Georgia for about 14 or 15 years. I'm not a good photographer, and I understand that, but being there on the field a lot of times, you can get some stuff and get a little bit lucky sometimes. I think that's what happened in this image with Orson Charles, who was a tight end at Georgia during Georgia's game with Florida in 2011. Let's take a look at the picture, and I'll go why it's a good picture. Well, first of all, it's in focus, so that's helpful, and it appears to be properly exposed. But what's happening here is that, and why this is kind of an important picture. This wound up being a cover of Dog Post, as a matter of fact. Orson Charles is from Tampa, Florida. He is #7 in this picture, and Orson came down to Georgia and Florida when he was visiting the Gators in 2008. Before the 2008 season, he was looking at Florida's national championship trophy and accidentally broke it. It was one of those crystal balls. So Georgia fans, when he signed with them, really thought that was awesome. A lot of Florida people didn't. This is the last game Orson played against the Gators. He had lost in 2008 and 2009, 2010. And in a lot of ways, he, in this picture, is getting out about 2 decades worth of frustrations in one shot. Actually, what's happened here is he's gotten tackled and he's standing up, and the guy on the ground, number 24, won't let go. But it doesn't appear that way in the image. In the image, it looks like Orson's standing over him and, basically talking shit to him. That's not what happened, but that's what the image looks like. And if you're Georgia, Florida has owned them from 1990, when Steve Spurrier got there, until about this image. And from this point forward, Georgia won 3 games in a row against the Gators. So this was kind of the biggest thing too, was that Georgia came into this game, I think they were 6-2. The winner of this game was in very good shape in terms of being alive in the SEC East still at that time. South Carolina had already lost a game earlier in that season, but they had beaten Georgia. That they still had to deal with Arkansas, a team that they went on to lose to. This game basically was do or die for Mark Richt, and it was Mark Richt's the head coach at Georgia, and he had a hard time beating the Gators for a long time. He was 1-5 in his first 6 games against them. He went down there with better teams, with teams that were even, with teams that weren't as good, and he lost every single time except in 2004. He won in 2007, but then Florida embarrassed Georgia in 2008 and 2009. In 2010, the 2 teams played in overtime. The game is split down the middle in Jacksonville. Half the stadium is Florida, half the stadium is Georgia. And for such a long time, Georgia had figured out basically how to lose. It wasn't really Florida a lot of times was better, but most of the time, Georgia just figured out how to shoot itself in the foot, and Florida was waiting around, and they took advantage of it. That changed in 2000. It really changed in 2007, but it cemented it at this stage in the 2011 game. Right here, Georgia's driving down the field to take the go-ahead score. They had gotten down 17-3. They were the better team coming to the game, and they got down 17-3, and they came back to win 24-20. But Orson was a pivotal part of the game in the third quarter when it swung in Georgia's momentum. It swung towards Georgia. I think Georgia's had the lead against Florida from this drive on. In other words, the Gators haven't had a lead against Georgia since, if my math or my memory serves correct. So this really wasn't a very important picture in terms of getting the frustrations out. It was also the game where you knew that Mark Richt would be the head coach at Georgia for some time because there was a lot of pressure surrounding him. He coming off a 2010 season where Georgia was 6-7 and lost to several not very good teams. This sort of defiant pose that Orson is, by the way, Orson's a very nice guy. This is not necessarily like him, but like I said, he was getting up from being tackled, and Evans just would not let go. I think Orson had been beating him a little bit, and Evans was getting frustrated. But this image was taken late in the third quarter, somewhere in mid to late third quarter, and Georgia had seized momentum. And eventually what happened was they broke through running the ball and won the game. And the series has changed ever since. And so for me, this picture means a lot of different things. It shows that Orson sort of taking out a kid from Florida, a kid from Tampa, Florida, taking out his frustrations on behalf of everybody at Georgia for the last 20 years. And it really ushered in a new era at Georgia. They had lost to Boise State, a good Boise State team and a good South Carolina team to start the season 0-2, and then they won 10 games in a row. But this was the pivotal game. If they didn't win this game, they wouldn't have won the East. And Mark Richt probably wouldn't be the head coach at Georgia right now. So that's how important that this image was. It kind of encapsulated all those things. You know I'm not a great photographer. I get that in terms of you compare yourself to some of these guys at Sports Illustrated and people like Brant Sandlin at the Atlanta paper that do it every single day. But I do think this is a pretty good picture of Orson Charles over the top of a Florida player, getting all of his frustrations out. This was the last time Orson played against Florida, and I'm fairly confident he was glad that he went out with a win. So that's just another picture from the Dawg Post archives. Stay tuned for a few more of these picture talks.